Здрасте.
Василий Петрович Голобородько?
Да.
Доброе утро, господин президент.
Russian aggression in Ukraine and about how brave and heroic is Ukrainian to protect our soil, to protect our future, to protect our freedom and our democracy. We are in the center of Kiev. We are here to protect Ukraine, and the Russian position is about a little bit more than 2 kilometers from here. This is very difficult to explain. What does it mean in the 21st century, in the middle of Europe, to be awakened by the Russian missile attack, by the Russian air bomb attack, when the people are shouting.
Yeah, the corporate media, the system pigs. This is the MSM, the mainstream media. Having a good old time on the dime of their corporate masters, making money off the suffering of others, having caused this suffering. Yeah, those are fucking system pigs.
Бендеровцы и неонацисты выставляют тяжелое вооружение, в том числе системы залпового огня, прямо в центральных районах крупных городов, включая Киев и Харьков. Они планируют вызвать ответный огонь российских ударных комплексов по жилым кварталам. По сути, они действуют так же, как и террористы во всем мире. Прикрываются людьми в надежде затем обвинить Россию в жертвах среди мирного населения. Достоверно известно, что все это происходит по рекомендации иностранных консультантов, прежде всего американских советников. Еще раз обращаюсь к военнослужащим вооруженных сил Украины. Не позволяйте неонацистам и бендеровцам использовать ваших детей, ваших жен и стариков в качестве живого щита. Берите власть в свои руки.
Hello everybody, my name is Marcel Irnie with IrnieracingNews. Today is February 28th, 2022. Trying to do a little catch up on the news with Putin and Ukraine and Russia, NATO, the WEF, and obviously Canada associated. I want to make this clear from my understanding. This is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. In fact, the people of Ukraine are not involved at all. This is between NATO, the UN, so the WEF, between those two, the USA and the United Nations, versus Putin, who is anti-globalist. Putin is doing everything the opposite of what the WEF would like. He's doing us all a favor in battling the bullshit that we've been living with for the past 2 years, and from well before that, before we even knew what's going on, or people like me that knew what was going on, with creating an emergency out of nothing. We never heard about any other wars. What about Yemen? What about the last 8 years in Ukraine?
For 8 years, the Ukrainians have been waging a war with their own people in the east. And for 7 years, Russia and the people of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics have been patiently waiting for Kiev to adhere to the Minsk agreements. Should Russia have waited maybe 20 more years? The amount of years that the U.S. spent killing Afghanis?
When Putin said, "I am denazifying the Ukraine," he literally meant just that. Before this week, it was widely known fact, even by your trusted MSM, the Ukraine is a stronghold for modern Nazi, and the US and Canada supply them with their weapons and arms. Seen here are 2 Ukrainian Nazis in full US combat gear provided by Joe Biden. These are interesting Nazis, though, as they operate with the Khazarian Mafia and the president of Ukraine, who are both Jewish. Human trafficking in Ukraine on Wikipedia. Ukraine is a source, transit, and destination country for men, women, and children trafficked transnationally for the purpose of commercial, sexual exploitation, and forced labor. Ukrainian women are trafficked to Russia, Poland, Turkey, China, the Czech Republic, and United Arab Emirates, Austria, Italy, Portugal, Germany, Greece, Israel, Spain, Lebanon, Hungary, Slovak Republic, Cyprus, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Serbia, Argentina, Norway, Iran, Bahrain, and the United States. The majority of Ukrainian labor trafficking victims were men exploited in Russia, the Czech Republic, and Poland, primarily forced to work as construction laborers, sailors, and factory and agricultural workers. There are indications Ukraine is the destination for people from neighboring countries trafficked for forced labor and sexual exploitation. Again, Wikipedia.
Ukraine is one of the largest money laundering countries in the world. Ukraine is essentially owned by the USA, NATO, and the UN. Terrible human trafficking goes through Ukraine. It's also a central hub of traffic for oil and gas going through Russia. In fact, 2/3, to my understanding, goes through the Ukraine. So this is a battle of economics as well. And Russia is obviously trying to hold on to that control. And if this was in the backyard of Canada, US, it would be happening the same. And of course, exactly the same thing is happening with the mainstream media that has been happening with Bullshit 19. It's amazing that some people have woken up to the Bullshit 19, the injections, the control, but then go right back into dark, into the black regarding the next MSN story that's getting distracted from our own freedoms. There are several steps that these globalists have taken from the West to the UN. Step 1 was Bullshit 19. Step 2, you could say, is this emergency in Ukraine. And then what's going to come next? Well, they've been hinting at this and talking about this forever with the carbon taxes, the climate change. They want to control us with climate change and to create this great reset. And so what do? They make energy cost more than we can afford. Control the world's supply of energy. They use the so-called climate crisis with energy restrictions. And we've seen this happen over the past decade as well. And now look at the prices of fuel, the prices of propane, the prices of natural gas. It's all going up and up and up. In the long term, they're going to make energy so expensive that we can't even afford to live outside of the cities. You're not going to be able to drive your car to and from. Your businesses are going to fail. We will not be able to afford the energy to heat our houses and to fill our vehicles up. They're going to make us lose our jobs, live in these cities, and become reliant on their own funding. We're going to be reliant on them paying us in like a social credit system, like what they just have announced a year ago in Canada. Specifically, the Senate of Canada Bill S233, an act to develop a national framework for a guaranteed livable basic income. So again, going down the same roller coaster path. We can't afford energy. We're going to have to live in the cities, and then we're going to have to get paid by them, and we'll be slaves. A guaranteed wage. Eventually, going down the path, they're going to bankrupt all of the countries. And that will lead, once you bankrupt everybody the whole system is torn down. That's how their great reset would probably be able to rise from there. This is a big information war. That's what it all comes, that's what war is in this day and time that we live. It's not like back in the day where you could just send troops into World War II and the troops just believe whatever they say.
Very sad, because I have been on the ground in Syria, for instance, and I know what happened in Syria. Now I see what is happening in Ukraine, and it is always the same. Truth is the first casualty of every war. This is so true. The same is happening now. People just don't have an idea what is happening.
That is extremely profound and very well said. Yeah, the truth, whatever the truth is, right now the truth is being crafted by one, it seems as though by one particular group. But in the United States, it's a very simple narrative. Russia generally we're encouraged to view Russia only in a negative light. I mean, there was a time when Boris Yeltsin was president and Gorbachev, that the United States, U.S. citizens were then encouraged to have a positive view. And they seem to be very they were viewed very favorably by the U.S. media, by U.S. presidents, and so on. And I don't know why, but then during the presidency of Putin, it's been encouraged to be negative. The thing is, Putin's not my president, so he doesn't have to do anything for me. He never has to tell me the truth. You know, our frustrations, perhaps yours as well, but again, I won't speak for you, is that the only individuals that really owe me any truth and need to give me the proper guidance is my own media and my own government.
Now we have media, we have many accesses to news, and obviously it's controlled on the mainstream media to the exact narrative. They're all saying the same thing. Every media with the UN, every media with the Western alliances are all pumping out the exact same thing. We support Ukraine. It says, again, Ukraine is just being destroyed between the powers of fighting over top of it. The economic powers of the UN and obviously Putin and the USA. And Ukraine, unfortunately, is getting the raw deal of this all. But Ukraine is not without its problems. And in fact, it's got the most problems of the world if you start to research the history of it. So what Russia is saying they're doing is they're denazifying Ukraine. Obviously, the USSR was broken up. Well, the Nazis, they all, just like communists, they all go somewhere. The black suits go into hiding and regroup. And the Nazis have regrouped in Ukraine. And they've been there for a long time. They have infiltrated the Ukrainian military, the political scene. In Canada, Trudeau tried to say we were Nazi supporters for supporting the Freedom Convoy. How ironic now that he is sending guns and ammunition and $55 million to support the Nazis in Ukraine. Like, you couldn't make this shit up.
Phone rang at 7:30 in the morning on the 24th of February. The dialer was my American friend from my high school days in the US. He was the last person I expected to call, especially at 7:30 in the morning. I knew immediately that the war has actually broken out. The beginning of the war did not surprise me. In fact, it's long overdue. What surprised me was the fact that he knew nothing about the suffering that the Russian Ukrainians had endured over the past 8 years. Let me get something straight. NATO promised that they wouldn't move an inch to the east. That was a lie. And now we are surrounded by an aggressive military alliance. NATO gladly bombed Yugoslavia under the pretenses of potential genocide. Did they bomb just military installations? No. NATO destroyed schools, hospitals, bridges, cultural monuments, private businesses, and industrial plants. Did you forget about that? Did you forget about how NATO pumped money and weapons into Georgia right before Georgia bombarded Russian peacekeepers and civilians? Of course you did. Because your media doesn't want you to know. Did you forget how yet another territory was ripped away from Serbia? Do you not remember Kosovo?
The Western and UN media, they talk non-stop with their own misinformation. They talk non-stop about the misinformation outside. From the Freedom Convoy and the misinformation about bullshit 19 and how unsafe that is and how the vaccine passport is just temporary and it's not going to infringe on your rights and how they're not going against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and hate. But it's all just a super lie. In truth, the perpetrators of all of the misinformation around the world is the media. They are the true evil, and they are tricking and so many people that aren't able to get onto these medias and learn and take the 100 hours of time it's going to eventually to understand.
Look at all the mainstream media. Look at them all the corporate media having a high old time. Yeah, the corporate media, the system pigs. This is the MSM, the mainstream media, having a good old time on the dime of their corporate masters, making money off the suffering of others, having caused this suffering. Yeah, those are fucking system pigs. The purveyors of fake news and the narrative. Yeah, I hope you see them. A good look at those system pigs. Huh? Fucking pigs, man. Pigs. They purvey fake news. They drum up hysteria on information that they know is fake. And the hysteria based on fake news becomes real actions in the real world. And then they come like fucking hyenas to feed off the corpse of Ukraine. That's what they're doing. God, I fucking hate the system pigs. Every last one of them. Every fucking cop who follows the orders of these pigs who lead us. Every so-called journalist of the mainstream media. They are system pigs and they are the enemy. Never, never fucking forget that. It's Kiev, Saturday morning, February 28th, 2022.
If you watch the mainstream media, it only takes a little bit to see, they give no context to anything about Ukraine and Russia. There's no context. There's no background. If you watch mainstream media, nobody's told anything about the president of Ukraine, any of his history. Nobody's given any context about the history of Ukraine.
Здрасте. Василий Петрович Голобородько?
Да.
Доброе утро, господин президент.
Привет, как дела? Серьезный день, ребята. Как настроение? Класс? Це не фейк, і я дуже серйозно відношусь до нашої країни, до життя кожної людини.
И вот здесь, понимаешь, теперь, они заставляют детей в будки ваши, строить. Знаешь, почему у нас жизнь собачья? Да потому что мы свой выбор с тобой начинаем в будках. Понятно? А выбирать-то не из. Из двух пи***цев выбираем меньше. И так 25 лет подряд. Ты знаешь, что это?
There's no talk about denazification. There's no talk about the slavery, what's going on there. There's no talking about the money laundering. There's no talking about Biden and his son Hunter and how he's got a position for $1 million a year or whatever it was per month if you break it down, that he's being paid is $84,000 a month for a position in Ukraine. It's just the media is manipulative. It's manipulating everything. They will not give you any context. And so many people are easily tricked. Like even in Kelowna, there was like a freaking rally, a protest rally downtown Kelowna for help Ukraine, help Ukraine. They don't even see any of the picture outside of what the MSN says. So it's just the brainwashing all over again. Bullshit 19 to the Ukraine fake. And look at all the fake media. Holy crap! There's video from like the news stations. Even Romeo sent me one from Romania on their main central MSN news that shows like trying to shoot down an aircraft fighting in the sky, and then we can go and take it side by side, and it's exactly video footage from a video game of aircraft shooting video game, and they just cropped it to be like 19 by 16, like a phone resolution instead of wide, identical. And I could show you a clip of it.
În video. Haideți să vedem imaginea de la Marea Azov. Cu inima suntem alături de Evgenia și de toți cei care, iată imaginile, cum se trage.
Stați un pic, să punem pauză și să dăm drumul înapoi lui Gâdea și la gunoiul ăla. Uitați-vă la avionul ăsta cum trage după el, da?
Avion de luptă după care se trage cu antiaeriana. Cred că a fost limpede mai devreme că a existat un contact, dar trage în continuare.
Cred că semnalele luminoase erau lansate de către avion ca să atragă rachete. Domnule general, ca să atragă tirul? Da. Deci astea galbene sunt lansate de avion ca să...
Da, dar cu toate astea pare că îl prinde, nu?
Da, l-a lovit și s-a prăbușit.
Și asta nu o spunem noi, a demonstrat-o războiul întotdeauna.
Da, să-i dau să mărim imaginea ca să vadă mai bine pe tot ecranul. Îmi spunea că pilotul de avion s-a catapultat. Uitați jocul video, ia uitați-l. Este identic. Și acum vedem pe cel care s-a catapultat, da? Acum înțelegeți care este manipularea.
Along with, there's like, let's put, they take a woman and put her all in makeup and everything, and then put a picture on the newspaper saying she was a Ukrainian woman that's been attacked, by Russians, etc. Russia is moving through Ukraine. They are not occupying and holding strongholds along the way. They're moving through, taking out the biolabs, taking out the airports, taking about communications. They're moving through. Now, we don't know what Putin knows. I'm sure will be revealed more information as time goes on. To summarize what I'm talking about is we have been and we all are in a controlled state of emergency brought on by our Western and UN governments. Our governments are truly the evil ones trying to enslave us. They are the totalitarian warmongers.
ארץ קטנה כמונו, זה מדהים. ואני רואה שאנחנו קונים את מנהטן וקונים את הונגריה וקונים את רומניה וקונים את פולין. אז אין בעיות לנו, אני מבין שהכישרונות והקשרים והתנופה מגיעה כמעט לכל מקום. וזה באמת מעניין. מעניין מפני שאנחנו ארץ קטנה בסך הכל. וכנראה שקשה לנו מאוד יהיה להיות ארץ תעשייתית. פשוט אין לנו מספיק שוק מקומי גדול בשביל לעשות תעשייה מקומית.
We've been dealing with this for decades, but we're all just waking up now because it's becoming so obvious. All the conspiracies have completely come true. Now, if you want to actually get some news from interesting perspectives, you can go on and watch the RK News, I think it was, or RT News, which is a Russian paid-for news station that is out of New York and out of somewhere else in the US. And I learned about this just recently with Bullshit 19 because they actually contacted me for the stories of Canada, which I was like, well, that's really interesting. Russia actually wants to report on the Freedom Convoy and in Canada and what's going on in Canada when none of the MSNs would obviously be involved at all. But they actually reached out to me. That's how I first learned about RT News.
Showing them the least bit of respect. I think, the fault for this lies on the shoulders of Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau. It's very clear.
If I can interject,
the whole world is certainly the whole world has certainly got eyes on Ottawa right now, and we're looking to see what the ending will be. Derek Sloan, Marcel Irnie, thank you both for making time for us today.
I would like to say a final note on that.
Thank you.
We're only ramping up. The Canadian Freedom Convoy, it's not just truckers. This is all of Canada. This is the Canadian convoy. And we are ramping up here in BC. More borders are going to be blocked. So it's not like this is just a little fringe that's going to go away. And it's not about just like, let's get the mandates dropped. In my opinion, I want to see accountability. I think the Canadian people want to see accountability. Trudeau needs to get out and be held in the courts. We need to see everybody in the court. And we need a real change because the system is corrupt. It's been corrupt for a long time. So just having the mandates drop is not going to fix it. We need a complete reset of the system, and somebody needs to start working on that.
Yeah, and I think the Freedom Convoy has caught fire down here in the U.S. because it's looks like copycat convoys are being planned here as well.
And look at the
we'll
U.S.
continue to monitor.
They're dropping all the masks.
It's all happening here.
I just got a call from Nevada. They're dropping the masks tomorrow.
Get both of you back on to discuss all of this. Derek Sloan and Marcel Irnie, thank you both.
Perfect, thanks.
Be glad to be coming back.
All right, that's going to do it for me right now.
Thank you. You're both clear.
Cheers.
Catch us anytime you want. I'm Manila Chan. Thank you for watching. We'll see you back here soon.
Bye, Manila. Okay, guys, there you have it. I tried to sneak in some more information at the end there. Just Nevada's dropping the mandates tomorrow for the masks, and you should see how happy the kids are in the classroom.
And I learned about this just recently with Bullshit 19 because they actually contacted me for the stories of Canada, which I was like, well, that's really interesting. Russia actually wants to report on the Freedom Convoy and in Canada and what's going on in Canada when none of the MSNs would obviously be involved at all. But they actually reached out to me. That's how I first learned about RT News. And then I randomly went there and they had a live feed going on. And they brought in some interesting information about the EU. So the EU is putting restrictions on Russia's central banking assets. The EU proposed or has already enacted a ban on RT networks, Sputnik, and subsidiaries on its territory. So the EU is banning any news that can be associated with Russia. Again, controlled media. This is the totalitarian regime. Controlled media? Where have we seen this before? Well, we've seen it in Ukraine when the president paid for by the US and UN, was put in there with a coup and funded by the US and UN. And then, of course, he then eliminated the opposition, put the opposition in jail, and, of course, eliminated any media opposition as well. Again, dictatorship, totalitarian regime of the Ukraine. The Ukraine is not a democracy, and they're attacking other territories and taking away their rights, and genocide going on strong, from what I understand.
Do you not remember Kosovo? Did you protest then? I bet you didn't, and I bet you didn't even care. Did you forget the invasion of Libya? If you're in Europe, you can't forget. Thousands of migrants are your daily reminder of what your governments did to that country. Did you protest the illegal invasion of Syria by Turkey and the US? I bet you didn't. Do you care about Saudi Arabia starving Yemen? I bet you don't. Do you care, or did you care, about the illegal invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses? What, they aren't people to you? Why haven't you been vocal against the murder of children and civilians at Iraqi and Afghani weddings by American bombardment?
The EU closes the entire airspace to Russian planes, including private jets. So if you're a Russian citizen, now you are being segregated. In fact, it's not just that. The EU is getting countries like Romania and all the ones around it to say, no Russian planes or Russian people or civilians are allowed to fly over these countries now. Segregation is strong. In fact, somebody wrote in the comments saying that their kids who are Russian going to school are now being harassed by teachers and students because they are of Russian heritage. Do you see the segregation from vaxxed to unvaxxed to masked to no mask, breathing barriers? They're just continuing the same perpetual motion of control, fear, and segregation, disrespect, creating hate between between humanity.
Причина, конечно же, они хотели бы видеть в президентах такого человека, как Василий Голобородько, с такими, самое главное, моральными ценностями. А второе, конечно же, это ответ всему политическому истеблишменту. Люди хотят что-то новое.
А я тут ни при чем. Перестаньте. Мы же все понимаем, что это твой человек. Нет, я был уверен, что Голобородько – это твой человек. Ясно. Если не твой, не мой, значит, это человек Рустема Ашотовича. Господа, клянусь, я не имею к Голобородько никакого...
Много всего нового научиться. Посмотреть, как дышит собака.
Я обіцяю вам піти в президенти України. І одразу виконую. Я іду в президенти України. Давайте зробимо це разом. З Новим роком.
Для того, щоб Україна була об'єднана, щоб Україна була захищена, щоб безпека України не ставилася під питання, прийшли до висновку, що цілісність України і її...
Where were your crocodile tears when Kiev started bombarding Ukrainian Russians in the east simply for doing the exact same thing as the Ukrainians did in the west, was to get rid of a corrupt government?
The UN Security Council calls for emergency special session on Ukrainian situation. So again, putting all of the countries of the UN on emergency control. And so now you're going to lose all your rights everywhere you live. If the UN, same for just how I just went to the bank today. I went to go and inquire about a new bank. And I walk in there with no mask. Lady's like, gives me some tongs. She gets out some tongs. Don't want to touch the thing with my hand. Oh, put that mask on. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I'll put that in my pocket. And then she goes, gets the supervisor. And the supervisor's like, gives me a pamphlet. It's like, well, you have to wear a mask in here. And I'm like, I'm medically exempt. And she's like, it doesn't matter. Our policy says you must wear a mask. And I'm like, that is illegal. You're discriminating against me medically. And they don't care. I'm already in the bank with no mask. And like, they got a huge shield in front of me. They're all wearing masks. And it's like, where is your common sense? You are following orders. What do you think the mask is doing for you? Do you not care? Do you not care about common sense? People just follow orders. They're fucking idiots.
We're so glad to be here today to pass the message loud and clear that this law and order government is not respecting the law. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні!
I'm fourth generation from Kiev. My family's 100% Ukrainian. I got to tell you, folks, I support what Putin's doing. Ukraine is so evil. Ukrainian people are so corrupt, so evil, such liars, thieves. The fact that President Biden and his son have corrupt dealings with Ukraine and still get elected gives you a situation as to why he's invading. Biden and Hunter stand to lose billions if Putin takes over Ukraine. I'm sorry, folks. I'm Ukrainian, and I support this invasion 100%. He's not going to touch Eastern Europe. Everybody needs to chill out. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. There's a whole lot under the table. And there's a massive mafia in Ukraine. How about the whole country?
Brussels says it will disconnect some of Russia's banks from the SWIFT network. Again, denazify Ukraine has never once been mentioned in Western media, in dinosaur media, as I started to say and people start to pick up. They have not been a democracy since 2014 coup backed up by the USA, NATO, the UN. Again, I gotta say it again. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, funded by the USA. The president of Ukraine and his minister, the boxer. You got a boxer and you got an actor comedian running this country? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. To end off, Putin is doing all of humanity a favor right now. This is what I believe from what I have understood. He is the only one in the world who has power and is fighting against the globalists, the World Economic Forum's agenda. He is hurting their agenda. Honestly, we all need to be supporting what he's doing. I do not support what he is known for. Right now, he is doing what everyone wants, and he is fighting the globalists. He's fighting the COVID bullshit 19 that's been happening. There was no bullshit 19 in Russia. People keep saying there was like 2 days in there. Well, again, 2 days or 2 years. He's not attacking us. He is helping the world right now. That's what's happening right now. While Trudeau and the USA are sending weapons to the Ukrainian people, the Nazis that he said that he was against. Again, you can't make this shit up. This is Irnieracing News, February 28th, 2022. So let's go watch all the footage now, from Putin's speech to everything else.
Where were your crocodile tears when Kiev shut off electricity and water to Crimea? Where was your Save the Ukrainian People when 48 civilian anti-Maidan Ukrainian protesters were rounded into a Union trade house and burned alive, whilst those who tried to escape the fiery hell were beaten and shot? Do you by any chance know who the Madonna of Gorlovka is? Do you know what the Alley of Angels memorial is? Let me give you a hint. People engraved into that memorial aren't alive, and they are not adults. Did you shed even one digital virtue signaling tear when the children at the children's beach in Zagreb were purposefully bombed by the Ukrainian military using illegal cluster bombs? I bet you didn't. But that's okay. How would you? Your mainstream media keeps you in the dark.
Russia is demonized, while Ukraine, or the president of Ukraine in particular, he's glorified. Even Western media compared him to Churchill. You can judge yourself if such a comparison is historically justifiable. No, but people don't know many of the facts happening there. Also, there is a lot of propaganda, a lot of fake videos, so it's hard to assess the real situation if you're not on the ground. For instance, I can give an example. I was a war correspondent, and I covered the wars in Libya, in Gaza, in Syria? Where were these crocodile tears of the whole world, or Western world, Europe, the United States, about the population of Yugoslavia that was bombarded and literally obliterated? I mean, civilians in Yugoslavia, after NATO started and the United States started the bombings on former Yugoslavia. Where were the crocodile tears about the Syrians, about the Libyans? I can give hundreds of examples for the last decades, also about the people of Iraq, people of Afghanistan. So we have good invasions that are perfectly justifiable, no matter that they result in millions of civilian deaths. And we have other cases when Russia is or other countries are involved, which are war crime. This is double standard. So I'm very disappointed by the simple fact that in my own country, we are so close to this area and people were kept in the dark. They had no idea what was happening there over these years, and now they still don't know, because if you watch our media, you even can't understand.
For 8 years, the US and its allies have been pumping billions of dollars worth of lethal weapons into Ukraine. For 8 years, the Ukrainians have been waging a war with their own people in the east. And for 7 years, Russia and the people of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics have been patiently waiting for Kiev to adhere to the Minsk agreements. Should Russia have waited maybe 20 more years? You know, the amount of years that the US spent killing Afghanis? So whilst leaders like Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen have been virtue signaling about the poor Ukrainians, they have been robbing the Ukrainians of their dignity, making their economy run on loans from the IMF, and basically robbing them of their future. And Russia is to blame when we were their primary trading partner. The West pushed Russia into a corner. Protect yourself from an increasingly hostile neighbor who wants to become part of a hostile military alliance called NATO and lose Nord Stream 2, for example. Or watch Russian Ukrainians get slaughtered by the thousands. The West wanted to fight this war with Russia until the very last Ukrainian.
Коломойской не был бы игрушкой, честно говоря, в руках ни одного из этих людей.
If you're a man of principles,
yes.
Why are you working for a man who the anti-corruption authorities say has stolen all this money from the people of this country?
Все каналы у нас принадлежат олигархам. Все крупные предприятия принадлежат этим группам. Получается, что мы все люди в Украине, 40 миллионов людей без принципов, мы все работаем на этих предприятиях.
In early 1989, President of Socialist Romania, Nicolae Ceausescu, received from Iulian Vlad a report about the talks in Malta between the two great superpowers of the time, the United States and the USSR. The report talks about a new equilibrium in Europe and redefining the spheres of influence. What is not known is that, together with the information mentioned above, Romanian spies, who were busy Operation Malta, have brought a map. This document, produced domestically, in time, the resignation of one Chief of General Staff of the Romanian Army, and an aviation catastrophe, one of Balatești, 1995. Externally, everything contained to the time in the map occurred, or is about to occur. On October 31, 2000, Michał Kelero, General of Army Corps at the time, the Chief of Staff of the Army, announced a press conference ad hoc late in the evening. He said, into the amazement of assistants, that mafia structures trying to destabilize Romania and enclavization southern Oltenia without offer other details. After several hours, the reply of Ministry of Interior, through General Michał Irnieracing, said, "We can talk about organized crime elements generated by low levels of living, by poverty." The next day, on November 1st, Michał Kelero resigned from the post of Chief of Staff of the Army. What happened, really?
Remember Kosovo? Well, the Lugansk and Donetsk republics have every right to exist. Russia didn't set the precedent. Your leaders did when they recognized Kosovo. And final food for thought. Why was there no bombardment of innocent civilians in Crimea, even though it's closer to Kiev than Donetsk is? I'll give you a hint. The actual Russian military was there, protecting the people. Here's another. The Ukrainian army has been fighting this invisible Russian army for 8 years now in the east, according to your mainstream media. Why then did the Ukrainian army collapse within 24 hours when fighting the actual Russian military? And since it did, what do you think your tax dollars were doing in Ukraine? That's right. Your tax dollars were used by Ukrainians in the West to kill Ukrainians in the East, and you didn't give a flying fuck about it. So if you haven't been following this conflict from day one, and now you put the blue and yellow flag on your photo, wipe away your crocodile tears, please, and find out why your governments have been supporting those who have made a Nazi criminal, Stepan Bandera, their national war hero. Don't expect a good result from pushing a bear and the dragon into a corner. And definitely don't be surprised when that bear and that dragon begin pushing back. So if you haven't been crying for the collectively millions of dead Iraqis, Afghanis, Syrians, Libyans, Yugoslavians, and East Ukrainians these past 20 years, but you're crying crocodile tears for Ukrainian military installations, wipe them away and think about what your governments have been doing and what they're still doing. And I hope that this 8-year story of a war started by a criminal Ukrainian government against its own people can finally come to an end, and Ukrainians and Russians can finally...
In 1992, William B. Wood, Chief Geographer of U.S. State Department, former ambassador to Afghanistan, gave the publicity a map with new borders of European states, which would have changed under the strategic interests after the fall of the communist bloc. Namely, understanding of Malta. Here's what was scheduled to happen. Scotland becomes independent. Part of Northern Ireland joins the Republic of Ireland. Brittany detached from France. Basque Country and Catalonia are separating from Spain. Italy is divided into the north and the south. Belgium is divided in Flanders and Wallonia. Czechoslovakia. It breaks in two. Kaliningrad becomes autonomous zone in Russia. Kosovo joins Albania. Transylvania become part of Hungary. Current Romanian counties, Dulj, Karash-Severin, and Timish, detached from Romania and become a country of gypsies. The western part of Bessarabia returns to Romania. and the eastern part of Bessarabia, including Transnistria, become autonomous area Dniester in Ukraine. Ceausescu had received such a document, and about him, talking in general, Kelleru. Let's see similarities between the above-mentioned map data and events from the old continent since 1990. In 1993, Czechoslovakia disappear from the world map and appear Czech Republic and Slovakia. The breakup of Yugoslavia, as the document says, was the effect of a series of armed conflicts since 1990, when Germany first recognized the independence of Slovenia and Croatia. In 1991 starts the war between Serbs and Croats, and in 1992 between Serbs and Bosnian. In 1996, the Albanian mafia takes control of drug trafficking in the Balkans. In 1999, NATO bombing destructive Serbia. In February 2008, Kosovo declares independence from Serbia with recognition of EU and US. It is expected that will join Albania in the next period. In November 2007, the Scottish Regional Prime Minister, Alex Salmond, Scottish National Party head, spoke first about a timetable for separation from Britain, and predicted that Scotland will be independent in 10 years respectively, in 2017. That was very close to occur in the summer of 2016 because of Brexit, the process by which Great Britain out of the EU following a controversial popular election which overturned the Scottish people who asked to separate of UK. In November 2007, the Flemish ignite the spark of divisions in Belgium. Flemish MPs voting on a law aimed at reducing the voting rights of francophones. It happens for the first time since the independence of Belgium in 1830. In the summer of 2009, the Berlusconi government is rocked by a scandal who revived the idea of secession between southern and northern Italy. In 2009, a residents of several areas of Catalonia participated in a symbolic referendum on the independence of this region to the government of Madrid. Escalating street battles between mafia clans in the years 2007, 2008, 2009 seem to never end in the center of Craiova city, the capital of Romanian province, Oltenia. Now, let's return to General Kelleru, and we quote from his statements they made at the time of the conscience causes him to take his approach. Mircea Kelleru. Oltenia had to get past Romania in December 2000. Had the time, we had information, according to which the enclavization of South Oltenia by the mafia structures is imminent. As far I know, they had not yet given up this plan. Let's return, and the terrible plane crash from Bangladesh. Reliable source inside the system. The man who brought information from Malta in 1989 was an Airbus plane who crashed in Bangladesh in 1995. There was not a plane crash, was an execution. It was himself targeted and must not be allowed to reach Brussels with any cost, including the lives of 49 passengers of the plane, plus the crew members. Because people should not ever know what they prepared for them in Malta in 1989. Many of their plans were already carried out. And others are underway. We see that, and we feel all in our daily lives. Until we not continue to keep evil tendency to sell our neighbor as we are sold ourselves by this pathetic Soviet character, we will not achieve what happens to us, and we will continue our lives in the service of some vicious and avid of unreal individuals. The trend of subjecting the majority by a minority there is now on sight and is expressed, at least in general perception, through the immense setback in terms of stability of the life on Earth himself.